This week on Quality Digest Live, we take a fresh look at the limitations of benchmarking.
Plus, we consider the changes and implications of the third edition of IEC 60601-1, 60601-1. That more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 3rd, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, let's start off by jumping right into the top news item of this week. Mikel Harry, one of the early shapers of Six Sigma at Motorola, is providing a limited number of full and partial scholarships for his MindPro Lean Six Sigma online training and certification program. The scholarships are being provided as part of Harry's Working Philanthropy initiative. As we know from meeting with Harry several times, he's got several different ways that he's trying to kind of give back kind of to the working community and so forth.
Pay it forward.
Exactly.
Right.
These scholarships that Harry's offering are for the economically disadvantaged professionals who have maybe lost their jobs, had their jobs downgraded, or find their employment at high risk due to the current economic climate. We all know what that's like. He's also offering special scholarships for college students, military veterans, active duty personnel, and Purple Heart recipients. You know, we've said many times that certificates are a great way to boost your resume and possibly your own personal bottom line. We've mentioned it, American Society for Quality, ASQ, has mentioned it. Studies have been done. These resume boosters really do help, and certification is a great way to do it. So one way to possibly earn a highly credible and respected Six Sigma credential in a black belt or a green belt is to apply for Harry's scholarship. He's been around for a long time. Anybody who knows the history of Six Sigma knows who Mikel Harry is. So if you can land a scholarship to his course, that could be a really good thing.
Yep, great story.
Yeah, and be free or some partial scholarship. So we don't know how many he's giving of these. So there is a link at the bottom of the screen that goes out to the story. On the story is a phone number. So if you're interested in the scholarship, give Mikel Harry and his company a call.
Yeah, he's always doing good things for the industry, so look out for that. Okay, another news piece that caught our eye this week comes from MIT, which is currently in the midst of a 2-year research project titled Production in the Innovation Economy. The study, which is being conducted by a 20-person research team, looks at U.S. manufacturing with the premise that innovation isn't the problem. The key area for improvement lies in translating those technological breakthroughs into job growth. Now, there have been some very interesting findings that are already coming out of the research. First of all, contrary to much popular opinion, the IT industry is not necessarily a good template for other innovation/manufacturing sectors, most of which have a need for heavier capital investments than IT. And we've seen that. And many times people look at IT as the model for how you're going to move forward in innovation in manufacturing. And that's not really necessarily a good one. Of course, it's not cheap, but the barriers to entry and capital investment is not as high as it is for obviously for pharmaceuticals or for medical devices and these other sectors.
Exactly.
However, as one belief is exploded, another is confirmed. Namely, the idea that the income that manufacturing workers make from their jobs helps create demand for other goods and services. It would stand to reason then, of course, that the loss of an area's manufacturing base has ripples throughout that area's overall economy. No surprise. The final report isn't due until 2013, but more preliminary findings will be released this coming spring. We'll bring you additional information on this ongoing story in the coming weeks and months, so look out for that.
You mentioned copying from IT. Actually, that kind of dovetails really nicely. Did you plan that?
I didn't. That was perfect.
It's perfect.
Yes.
Nice segue here. Our top story, one of our top stories this week was from Trip Babbitt, a frequent contributor, and the perfect benchmark. And according to Trip, there is really only one perfect benchmark. And basically, this is kind of Trip's, I wouldn't call it a scree, but let's say he doesn't believe that, and a lot of people don't believe that benchmarking is a good way to improve your business, to improve your company. And the idea, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, it's actually been around for a long time. Benchmarking simply means patterning yourself, or some people might say copying what other companies doing who are considered to be best in class within their particular industry. And very often you might benchmark against a company that isn't necessarily within your industry, but maybe you feel is similar. Well, there's a lot of problems with this. Tripp believes, and a lot of people believe, that you can't just go in and copy what another company is doing, because as much as they may look like your company, they perhaps aren't really all that much like your company.
There's a DNA that goes into a corporate culture, an organizational culture, that you can't really be replicated easily. And W. Edwards Deming was a real critic of what he called copying.
Right.
That he thought it just didn't work, and that you really couldn't port over one set of ideas from one company to another.
Right, and as Tripp alludes to in his kicker on that article, and he actually says in there, the really only perfect benchmark is, what does your customer want?
That's right.
And that's what you should be. Your benchmark should be what your customer wants. But I think, well, I'll get to this in a little bit. Let's take a look. There's a couple of assumptions, 3 assumptions that Tripp says people make about benchmarking, which he believes leads them down the wrong path. So if we go to our PowerPoint slide here, the first is that organizations that you benchmark against are comparable. Well, we just touched on that. As a matter of fact, you touched it on your short news story. There is no guarantee that your organization is the same as the organization you're benchmarking against. And if they aren't, if they're not set up the same, if the culture isn't the same, if processes aren't the same, you may not be able to copy really what they're doing. Or if you try to copy it, you're actually going to hurt yourself. The benchmark performance is actually better than your organization. Well, how do you know that?
Yeah, how do you know that what you're getting is really what you think you're going to get when you copy that? Maybe you're going to copy some of their problems too.
You're going to copy their problems as well. Yeah. And the third assumption is what you learn from benchmarking can be applied.
That's a big one.
This is the application side of it. So, I mean, this was a fairly short article, and the sum of it really is that Tripp is saying that you can't really do this, and I would disagree. I would say you can't do it if what you're doing is copying. If what you're doing is copying, then everything Tripp says is absolutely right. However, you don't have to copy. You can use something similar to this concept of TRIZ, which is really kind of an innovation product development thing that's been around for a long time.
It's Russian in nature, and I believe it stands for Theory of Inventive Problem Solving.
There's something, something along that line. But the premise behind TRIZ, and I'll try to wrap this up here, is that there's 3 kind of concepts. The first is problems and solutions are repeated across industries and sciences. Very rarely is somebody inventing something brand new. It's usually a permutation. Patterns of technical evolution are also repeated across industries and sciences. And innovations use scientific effects outside of the field in which they were developed. And for me, this is really what benchmarking is. Benchmarking isn't copying. It's going in, looking at what a company is doing, understanding, and this is the key part, understanding why they're doing it. If you're understanding why they're using this piece of technology or this piece of software or this management technique, if you understand the reason behind it, if you understand what the impact is, I mean, not just impact through the entire company, if you understand what it's actually doing, then you can make a sensible decision as to whether that technology, process, whatever makes sense for your company. To me, that's what benchmarking is. It isn't copying. If it's copying, then yeah, you're going down the wrong road.
Well, what Tripp is doing here, and with knowledge, and I think that what we've done as well, what Paul Naismith did recently as well this week with an article on ISO standards, is kind of really set up a straw man argument that he set up the argument that's easily blown down. Now, but I think I can defend Tripp a little bit here, because what he's saying, I think, is, yes, the depth to which you're talking about here, sure, is valuable for benchmarking. But he's talking about the easy benchmarking that people do, where they just look at a competitor or look at an analogous organization and say, hey, I think they're doing something right. So I want to just rip them off. And hey, if you're an auto manufacturer, you're not going to be able to look at what Toyota is doing from afar, or even going into their organization and touring their plants and do it the way they do it. It just isn't going to work. So I think Tripp has a good point here. I think there's really a couple of ways of looking at it.
Yeah, it's like anything. It's the way it's a tool. Yeah. Just like ISO 9000's tool. There's another article by Paul Naismith. It's how you use the tool. If you use it wrong, it's going to lead you down the wrong track. If you use it right, you can get something out of it.
That's right.
Okay,
great. All right. Well, thanks, Dirk. Thanks, Tripp. Okay. Well, good article there, and we have another one here coming up that we covered this week. Turning the 3rd edition of IEC 60601-1 to your advantage. That's the name of an article written by Dale Hallerberg that appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Now, as many of you know, IEC 60601-1 is an International Electrotechnical Commission standard governing the safety and performance of medical devices. Dale's article talks about the specifics of the third edition of the standard, which presents some important changes, as well as the shifting philosophy of this standard and others. Now, author Dale Hallerberg is joining us now via Skype, and we're going to chat with him about the implications of this new edition of IEC 60601-1. Welcome, Dale.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon.
Hey there.
Good to have you. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for writing a really interesting, in-depth article. And I want to begin, you began your piece with an interesting take on how and why standards change over time, from the specific and prescriptive to the general and more performance-based. Now, you had a quote, and I think we want to call it up here on our screen share. You had what I thought was a really interesting quote in your article that I think really talks about what this is, and we're gonna share it with our audience here. You write, the philosophy of the third edition of IEC 60601-1 is the manifestation of the next step in the evolution of standards. It requires designers of medical equipment to analyze the hazards and risks that might come from the use of a device, and then design the device to address those risks. Instead of physical requirements or test requirements, the designer has requirements for analyzing the risk of the device and mitigating the safety hazards. This throws open the door to the use of new ideas and technologies that cannot even be predicted at this time. Ultimately, the philosophy of the third edition is intended to encourage novel and improved clinical applications, resulting in better patient outcomes. So, is the third edition of the standard basically about mitigating risk and encouraging innovation, in your mind?
Well, it certainly was designed with the idea and written with the idea to allow faster and cleaner innovation from medical manufacturers. I'm glad that you picked up on that, what I put in the paper, the transition between standards of old and new standards. I always try to look at what's happening in standards for medical devices very philosophically. And this edition of the standard really forces us to do that. As you said, there's been a slow transition through standards from prescriptive, where they told you exactly what to do, to test-based, where you perform some tests, and if you passed, then it was considered fine, to this new philosophy, which is intended to allow greater latitude for manufacturers to come up with new ideas that were never considered, and yet the standard has approaches and risk management considerations that will properly evaluate those products, even though we can't even think what they might be today.
Well, and maybe you can get into it a little more depth, what are some of the specific changes that really help to address these issues? Because, hey, risk, for instance, is something that we're seeing across all standards, across all people in our industry need to be aware of mitigating risk and understanding how quality assurance connects with risk management. So what are the specific protocols or new changes in the standard that really specifically address that?
Yes, so as we mentioned, the intent of the standard was to try to allow new devices. But if you don't know what the new device is going to be, then you need some kind of a process in place that's going to examine what might go wrong with a potential device and how to then mitigate that risk or reduce that risk to an acceptable level. So this is done in this new standard by adopting an ISO standard, ISO 14971. And this is a specific risk management standard for medical devices. And so you need a process in place in your manufacturing, actually in the design environment, that takes a look at every possible outcome and evaluates, well, what is the likelihood of that dangerous outcome happening and what is the severity of it, and comparing these. And if they are above a certain level of risk, where it's an unacceptable risk, then you've got to do something. You have to reduce that risk some way. You have to find a good way to reduce it. So this is the major change in this edition of the standard. We call it the third edition. The second edition briefly touched on risk management, but this third edition really calls for manufacturers to go back to that ISO 14971 document and use it as a structure for a process of risk management in their medical device. And that is, I would say, the largest change between the old edition, the second edition, and this new edition. the third.
So Dale, are you saying that are people going to have to, if you're in the medical device arena, are you going to have to be working with both those standards then, the 60601-1 and the
14971?
14971.
Well, and as well as Dale, I wanted to touch on that as well. How does FDA play into this? How do FDA, how do what you need to do to satisfy the FDA also connect in with both these standards?
Okay, to answer the first question, absolutely. You will have to use both the ISO 14971 as a basis for your risk management processes, as well as the 60601 standard. And those aren't all. The 601 series of standards includes horizontal standards that apply to lots of different devices, and a good example might be electromagnetic compatibility requirements. So those apply to any medical device. And in addition, there are particular standards for clinical modalities, and an electromyogram or an EKG machine, let's say. So there's a whole series of standards beyond just the two which we mentioned, the 14971 risk management and the 60601 base standard. Now, could you go ahead and restate your second question for me?
I was just wondering how FDA regulatory controls fit into that as well.
Yeah. FDA, of course, has some of their own requirements for good manufacturing practices and such. Now, they have traditionally accepted using harmonized standards like this as proof of electrical safety, mechanical safety, these sort of things. And indeed, the FDA has agreed that they will accept using this new version of the standard for products that are now being produced and designed. There's a timetable for transition for that FDA work. They've already said they will accept products. If you design a new product today and you use the third edition, they find that acceptable. And in fact, after June of next year, 2013, you'll have to use this third edition for new products. Now, for old existing products that you're keeping in the manufacturing pipeline, we would say those are being grandfathered in, and the FDA will continue to accept those off into the future, just assuming that, of course, there's a slow and steady obsolescence of those. So at some point, the second edition will just die its own death, if you will. But as of June of next year, you'll need to use this new standard for FDA submittals for new products.
So that's kind of the calendar. That's the timeline going forward. Really, it's mid-year 2013, in which you pretty much have to be adapted to this new edition. Are there milestones along that way that people need to continue the transition?
There's a lot of timetables, and you can imagine that each country has their own timetable. So the Canadians are doing something a little different for the Standards Council of Canada and Health Canada. The US FDA has one timetable. For manufacturers that sell products around the world, it's a very complex and difficult issue. And really, without going into every detail of every country, probably the most important one is the European Union. That requirement is that the third edition standard you must begin to use that by June of this year. And not just for new products, but existing products as well. So the demand for the European application is a much tighter time frame and much more demanding than what the FDA is doing or what the Canadians are doing.
Okay, Dale, thanks for the great information. Unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time on you here. Is more complete information on this timeline and some of the other things you mentioned, is that available either on
on the
ISO website, yeah, or in the article itself? Or was it in the article? The timeline, was that in the article?
There was, yes. There were some timelines,
yes,
I believe.
If you'll share that article with your viewers on your website, then I would encourage them to go there and check it out and read it. It's a brief overview. These are very complex issues, and we encourage you to get in touch with TÜV Rheinland North America if you've got further questions. We would be glad to help you out.
That's great. Well, thank you again, Dale Hallerberg, and product manager, testing manager, I believe, Dale, for the medical device testing division of TÜV Rheinland.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the show. And yes, Dale is correct. We have the article on our website. It's actually, a link is just below the player
just
right
below
here.
The player also, yeah, there's a link to the article.
So go check that out. And there's a lot of resources. As Dale said, there's a lot of information out there. It's a fairly complex transition, but if you're in that space, you need to be aware of what's going on. So check it out and do your research.
All right. Thanks, Dale.
Thank you, Dale.
All right,
well, good segment there with Dale of TÜV Rheinland, and yeah, we always want to present to our audience the latest information on standards and transition to new editions.
You know, one thing we didn't ask, maybe you know, I meant to ask, we ran out of time on that. I'm wondering if this is just for implantable medical devices or any medical device.
I believe it's any, but certainly with regard to the electronic elements of medical devices is because it's an IEC standard, so it's
right.
You know.
Oh, true. Yeah.
But you know, it's a very broad. I mean, Dale's right. It's a brief overview he gave, but it's still a rather lengthy article.
Right.
And it's a complex topic. So definitely, again, if you're in that space and you need to be aware of the changes in the standard, you know, get on it and get out to this article as a starting point,
right.
and then go from there on.
And obviously, also the IEC website as well,
and the ISO website as well for 14971 as Dale mentioned,
exactly
is important, and FDA. I mean, FDA probably has good information on that as well.
Yep. Okay, moving on. We had you remember last week we talked about a letter we'd gotten from a reader that asked a technical question. They wanted to know about something about CMM probes, and we sent that off to a number of our advertisers that work in that space, and got a great article back from Hexagon Metrology that dealt with that. Right on the tail end of that, we got a fairly straightforward question from a reader. I had a question about establishing reference frames. And I'm going to come over to our slide here. It was kind of fun because it was right after, maybe they heard the show and said, well, I've got a technical question too. So this one came from Eric Ernst, maybe? Eric J. Ernst. When measuring a machined part on the CMM, how many times should you establish the reference frames? Is one time accurate zeiss, or should you establish them twice or more? And we got
good question.
We sent that out, and we got an immediate response from our friends at
Carl Zeiss.
Carl Zeiss, right? From Mike Rotterdam.
Mike Rotterdam.
So Mike wrote back. I am a big fan of looping or iterating the base alignment in Calypso. That happens to be Zeiss's software, their measurement software. The primary purpose of the base alignment is to accurately locate the workpiece within the CMM volume. This way, the CMM can navigate from feature to feature in a collision-free manner. This becomes paramount when the features are small or access to the features is narrow. When a workpiece does not have a nice flat or round surface, say it consists of sculptured freeform surfaces, the base alignment methodology changes. Here we do 3D best fitting, where iterating is imperative. When iterating, I set a loop maximum, say 5 times, but I also set a threshold for the goodness of fit of the base alignment. This way, when the threshold is met, it breaks out of the loop. Now, the drawback of iterating the base alignment is additional time. So one must always weigh the pros and cons of sacrificing additional time for guaranteeing the precise location of the workpiece. That response was from Mike Rotterdam of Carl Zeiss Industrial Metrology. So for those of you who work with CMMs or 3D stuff, you know exactly what Mike was saying there. We don't know.
Oh, I know.
Did you understand that?
He was right on the money.
Yeah. Mike was like, yeah, man, he just nailed that.
He's on it. He's on it. And you know, and we have a large group, as we always say here, of partners that we work with that are on it in very many different sectors. So if you have a question, we want to hear it. So email us at qdl@qualitydigest.com. Let us know the questions that you may have, and let us know what you want us to pose to our experts that we work with, and we'll get you an answer. If not in the show, then in QDD, our daily email newsletter. So look out for that. Great. Well, thanks, Dirk. All right, and now a new segment on the show. This is what we call the QDL Job Board. This is where we will highlight a great employment opportunity within the quality field. This week on the job board, Artan Laboratories, Inc. Artan is a growing research and development company specializing in innovative medical technologies and devices. And they're seeking a quality assurance engineer for their Trenton, Princeton, New Jersey facility.
Hey,
who knows Jersey? Who knows Jersey better than me?
Yeah, what exit?
Hey, Artan has developed numerous technologies in medical diagnostics, biosensors and biotechnology, non-destructive testing, aerospace, and military applications. So if you have a working knowledge of QSR, GMP, ISO, FDA, and CE, Artan would like to talk to you. To learn more, Visit the job link at www.artanlabs.com. We have the link right here on the player page and also below the player, so you can link right out to them. And if you know of a job opening that we should highlight here on Quality Digest Live, again, email us at qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll feature it in an upcoming show.
That's right. Coming up next week, part 2 of Davis Balistracci's article on slow-moving glacial improvement programs.
We covered the first part a couple weeks ago, or last week, on the show here. Are really interesting. Davis, again, as we talk about statistical perspective, but on psychology of change and change management. So look out for that.
And we're going to try to get Davis on the show next week if we can. If you happen to know Davis, drop him a line. Say you'd really like to see his mug here on Quality Digest Live Friday morning.
Davis always has very interesting things to say.
Yes, he does.
So we're hoping.
No opinions from Davis.
No. So
very shy and unassuming young man.
Young man, yes, he is. And so look out for that, and definitely look out for the article next week in QDD. Yeah. So and another couple of things we have coming up here very soon with Quality Digest. We have a couple of episodes of our well-received Technorazi live demo video series. First up is Carl Zeiss Industrial Metrology. We just heard from Carl Zeiss a moment ago on Letters. That will be on Wednesday, February 14th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to be broadcasting it live from the floor of MD&M West in Anaheim, California.
That's right.
We'll be demoing Zeiss's Micura CMM as well as their Surfcom Flex portable surface measuring instrument. So look out for that. After that, next month, we're going to be doing a Technorazi Live with Hexagon Metrology. That'll be on Thursday, March 22nd, also at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And that's going to be live from Hexagon's North American headquarters in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Yeah. We'll be looking at a yet-to-be-announced new technology from Hexagon. Very excited about that one.
New product. It's always fun to be in there on a new product rollout.
We love those things. So it's your chance to see that for the first time as well as ours. So look out for that on Thursday the 22nd. And we're going to be following that up, sticking around at Hexagon and broadcasting this show, QDL, from their shop the following Friday on March 23rd.
Should be fun.
So look out for that. You won't want to miss it.
Okay, so that wraps us up here for this Friday.
That's right.
Some interesting programs, job-oriented. So, I just want to highlight that we did touch on a couple of job-related issues. If you're looking for a job, if you have a job opening, send us an email on it, and if we can get it on the show, we will. Also, keep in mind, Six Sigma certification. Check out Mikel Harry. I mean, if you can get yourself a scholarship, couldn't hurt.
Couldn't hurt.
Yep.
All right. Well, great.
All right. So that's it for today, and thanks for joining us.
Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.
Three, two, one, fire.